Molweni nonke. Hello everyone. My name is Lwazi Mkula and I'm a violin teacher and a strings educator. So my talk today is going to be focusing on the teaching and learning practice, or sort of how we go about the practice, the process of teaching and learning. Just for some context, I've always been very intrigued or interested in learning about how students learn and develop. And so it's one thing to say that you're teaching students, but not really understanding why certain approaches work and why certain approaches don't work. So it's essentially a matter of continuously improving your teaching, or my teaching in the sense, and how is my teaching informed by theory or past experiences. It's a common case with most teachers that I've seen. We teach sort of how we were taught. So what we were taught, we sort of always impart onto our students, which is not entirely problematic or a problem, just that we need to then also think about why our teachers taught it the way they did, or why they chose to omit certain things or add certain things for our teaching, for our learning and teaching. So then it's important for me personally as a teacher to always try and question what I was taught, and seeing or thinking about certain things, that such as why. The main question here would be why, really, and not just doing things just because that's just how they're done, you know what I mean? So that is, I think, it's a bit of a dangerous, slippery slope, to be honest, a teacher doing things just because that's how I was taught. So we need to draw from that experience, but at the same time try to find ways of expanding our understanding. Okay, so to get going, just for some context, I'll be using a theory of cognitive development proposed by a Russian psychologist, educational psychologist, philosopher, researcher by the name of Lev Vygotsky. So this is a theory of learning and development that was developed throughout the 1900s, mid 1900s, so to be the 20th century. Hope I'm right. And so here what he looks at is looking at how kids learn in formalized schooling environments, or formalized learning environments. Doesn't necessarily always be a school, could be the violin studio, for example. So this research is not really music research, but it's something that I've tried to incorporate into my teaching so that I can better understand how I do what I do and why it works or why it doesn't work. So, and teaching within a schooling context, it's important for me to know to understand that my students are being taught a certain way, and I need to understand that and sort of try and tap into that in our lessons as well, because it's all related in a way. Okay, so one of the most important things from Vygotsky's theory that I would like to focus on for today is the notion of, or the concept of, the Zone of Proximal Development, or the ZPD. So please, I might use ZPT, I might use the whole word sometimes, so bear with me. So the ZPD essentially refers to this cognitive space between what a student can do with or to little help from you as a teacher, and what they can't do. So it's almost like a spectrum, so it's always going to be moving and shifting. So the Zone of Proximal Development offers us a lot of offers us a way in which we can structure our teaching, and this could also help inform our repertoire choices, our technical choices, our studies, and that sort of thing, because then everything is sort of interwoven or threaded together. And yeah, so that's basically the short definition of this term of Zone of Proximal Development. So as violin teachers or strings teachers, we often in a position of privilege because we have several resources that we can draw from that help us in our sort of teaching and sort of our teaching trajectories. So we know exactly, if I do this should happen. It doesn't have to be like necessarily from one lesson to the next, but in a longer span of time. For example, we've got the flash, you've got shredder, you've got the self check, the scales, technical stuff, which is incredibly useful. And we've got our collection of studies. You've got your Kreuzers, you've got your Paganini Caprices, you've got your Mazzas, and those other things, which also tap into developing technique. It can be left hand or right hand technique, but these are resources that we have access to. And then obviously then there's the repertoire that helps us in our teaching. So selecting repertoire is an important part of teaching, because repertoire choices are not random. They shouldn't. Personally, I don't think they should be random. I'm not saying people do it randomly, but I'm just saying, for me personally, this is not a random process. It should be informed by something, and there should be an end goal to what we're playing or what we're teaching. You've got in our box of resources, you've got your Vivaldi concerti, your Oscar reading concerti, your Koshila concerti, that sort of thing, your Corellis. Those are all fundamental and important for development in the violin. And so, as teachers, we need to make sure that we use these resources to achieve the students' full potential, musical development potential. And essentially that should be our end goal. At least that's what I think. So for purposes of this presentation, I'll be looking at the ZPD and how scales form an important part in expanding a student's ZPD. So just to break it down, the scale. Most students, they will play the scales from a young age. So basically the basic scale, let's say G, that will be your basic scale. So as a teacher, cognitively, if you think about it in a cognitive sense, the student will then learn that, okay, the first finger, there's a gap between the first and second fingers in this particular scale. Then there's a semitone, which is like your basic form or your left hand structure. Okay. So students cognitively, then this will be in sort of processed mentally. They will process this, and of course this will take practice. But by formalized repetition and practicing, this becomes sort of embodied. Okay, that's what the first part of the scales and how ZPT can inform this process. And then going on, in order to expand the students' ZPD, then we then introduce several processes or several more complex processes relating to the scale. One of those could be the slur. Okay, so now the student then learns about two things: slurring, so playing more than one note in a single bow, and then also they learn about board division. Okay, that are just two I'm focusing on. There are also a lot more other things that you can focus on: sound, production, intonation, and so on. But I'm focusing on those two for now. And then, in order then continuing on that expansion of the ZPD, we introduce the double stops, which is more complex than the basic single scale or single line scale. So in order for us for the student to learn the end goal, which is playing double stop scale, we then as a teacher you need to utilize certain methods or approaches. One of these that I like a lot is the concept of scaffolding. Basically just like a basic scaffold. So leading using smaller tasks, cognitive tasks, well, physical and cognitive, of to leading up to playing the double stop scale. One of the most notable sort of form of scaffolding when we're teaching scales would be the breaking of the octave, for example. And so on. So the student then, in that process, mentally, they process the first part, which is the breaking of the octave, and then the double stop. Okay, and then obviously they combine those motions that then make up the entire scale with the broken octave and then the double stop. And then the student will then obviously go home, practice this, and then at home, what usually happens in the learning process or the developmental process, that the student will encounter difficulties during this process. Let it be getting the intonation right, let it be getting the bow stroke right for the actual playing on two strings at the same time. And that difficulty or that moment of sort of unclarity, I refer to it, well, according to Vygotsky, that would be the cognitive conflict. So what the student knows and what the student doesn't know yet is sort of in conflict. So now mentally she or he then needs to find a way to reconcile that conflict. Then the moment that is successfully done, cognitively the student's thinking or cognitive process then gets altered, which means the PD is being expanded. So eventually then the student will be able to play it without the break. Okay, that is essentially the end goal. Okay, then in this way, once that cognitive conflict has been resolved or reconciled, then we can say that the learning has occurred, or true learning has occurred. Okay, excuse me. Another important process in expanding the ZPD is the idea of concept of modeling. So demonstration, for example, playing the scale for the student, playing it in thirds, so the student will play the first three notes, then just join in. That also helps in developing the student's ear. So, and then obviously cognitively then they understand that the two notes when played at the same time should sound a certain way, and thus the cognitive structures or schema have been altered or they've changed. Okay, so it's a sort of form of assimilation of information. So yeah, but let me not dwell too much on that. Okay, so then essentially what I like in coming to close off is that when we're teaching, we need to always try and make sure that our teaching is development generating or generating development. In this way, our lessons are not random, but are informed by each educational decisions. and then this should help in ensuring that our students achieve their full musical developmental potential. And then obviously there's the idea of the scale, double stop scale. Then it gets transferred or gets used in repertoire, and then because the basic motions have been learned, and then cognitively this is there, it can be applied in repertoire. I hope that makes sense. Sorry. Yeah, and then in closing, I would say that teaching and learning processes always needs to be development generating, thus consistently expanding the zone of proximal development. I hope this has been informative, and hopefully you can use some of what I've said in this presentation to help your teaching, or to help you think about how we approach teaching as a whole. Thank you very much.